It was supposed to be a simple job application, a clean email, a PDF resume, nothing fancy, just another desperate attempt from a broke girl in a city that chewed up dreams like chewing gum. But when Emily Hart pressed send at exactly 2:13 a.m., she didn't realize she had attached the wrong file. Not just the wrong file. The one she had sworn never to open again. A photo she had taken months ago. Not for anyone else, not for social media, not even for validation. Just a moment of raw exposure, of looking at her own body and saying, "I exist." She screamed into her pillow when she saw the confirmation email from Stanton Global, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. It was too late. The message was gone, and with it, her last ounce of dignity. She stayed up the rest of the night drafting an apology email but never sent it. What could she say? "Hi, I accidentally sent you a nude. Please ignore my breasts and consider me for your assistant role?" No. She was mortified, and when her alarm buzzed at 7, she was ready to crawl into the nearest hole and never come out. Then at 9:03 a.m., her phone rang. A woman's voice, crisp, controlled. "Mr. Stanton would like to meet you. Today." 11 sharp. Emily's heart stopped. Mr. Stanton, as in Alexander Stanton, billionaire CEO of Stanton Global, the man who had single-handedly restructured the media empire of New York, the man known for firing executives mid-lunch and walking out of boardrooms when bored, that Mr. Stanton wanted to meet her. She almost asked, "Are you sure?" But she didn't. Instead, she said thank you and stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror like it might hold the answers. At 10:56 a.m., she stood outside the glass tower that touched the clouds. Her palms were sweating, her knees hollow. Security let her through without a question. The elevator ride to the 61st floor felt like ascending into heaven with none of the forgiveness. The doors opened into silence, a long hallway, a glass door. She stepped in. The office was minimal, cold, sleek, white floors, chrome desk, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the New York skyline like a painting. He sat with his back to her. For a second, she thought maybe she could pretend to be someone else, a different girl, a girl who hadn't accidentally sent her naked self to a man who controlled $1 billion empire. Then he spoke. "You should be more careful with what you send out into the world." His voice was smooth, even, not angry, not mocking, just unreadable. She opened her mouth, closed it again. "I didn't mean." But he cut her off. "You attached a file to your resume, a personal one. I assume it wasn't intentional." Her cheeks burned. "No, of course not." He finally turned around, tall, perfectly dressed in a black button-up and no tie, his jaw carved like it was designed for magazines, his eyes pale gray, cool and assessing. He looked at her like a puzzle. "I don't need an apology." She blinked. "You don't?" He stood slowly, walked toward her, each step measured. "What I need is someone who's honest without trying, someone who doesn't flinch when seen, someone who reminds me that not everything can be curated." She stared. He reached his desk, picked up a file. "This is not an offer for the assistant job." Her stomach dropped. "It's something different." "What kind of job?" His mouth tilted slightly. Not a smile. "I don't need a secretary, Miss Hart. I need a midnight distraction, and I think you just applied." She couldn't breathe. "What?" "The offer stands until 10 tonight. After that, your photo disappears. And so do you." Then he turned back to the window, and just like that, the interview was over. Emily Hart had never been reckless. She didn't drink much. She didn't trust easily. She kept her world small, manageable, and quiet. Most people mistook her shyness for sweetness, her silence for softness. What they didn't see was the constant, exhausting effort it took just to feel safe in her own skin. She had grown up on the outskirts of Philadelphia, raised by a mother who believed appearances were everything and a stepfather who believed he owned every woman in the house. At 16, she stopped wearing makeup, stopped going to church, and stopped telling anyone what really happened behind closed doors. She moved to New York at 20 with 2 suitcases, a scholarship that barely covered rent, and a part-time barista job that paid in leftover pastries and minimum wage. She studied design at night, picked up freelance gigs when she could, and lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in a building where the landlord didn't fix anything unless someone threatened to sue. The photo she had sent by mistake wasn't meant for seduction. It wasn't even meant for anyone else. It was part of a project she'd started for herself, an attempt to reclaim her body after years of dissociation. She had set up a mirror, stripped down, and taken a single photograph. No posing, no filters, just her, raw and honest, under harsh apartment light. She named the file Reclaim JPG. Somehow, in her haze of insomnia and caffeine, she had attached it instead of her resume, and now the most powerful man she had ever been near had seen it. Alexander Stanton was everything the tabloids said, and more. CEO of Stanton Global, 36, unmarried, untouchable, a self-made billionaire by 30 who bought dying companies, gutted their boards, and rebuilt them into media juggernauts. He had been on the cover of Forbes 4 times, GQ twice, and rumored to be dating 3 different actresses in the past year, none of whom lasted longer than 6 weeks. Known for his strict privacy, brutal efficiency, and complete emotional detachment, Alexander was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he shifted its gravitational center. People didn't speak unless spoken to. Employees never asked personal questions. He had no pets, no social media, and no hobbies anyone could confirm. He worked, he built, he controlled. That was all. What no one knew, or rather, what they chose not to question, was that Alexander never stayed in the office past 6 p.m. unless absolutely necessary. Until 6 months ago. Something had shifted. Since then, he had become nocturnal. Meetings scheduled after hours. Lights on in the penthouse office until 3 a.m. Rumors began to swirl. Some said insomnia. Others whispered about a breakdown. But no one asked him directly. No one dared. The offer he made Emily, if it could even be called an offer, was the most insane, inappropriate, and unprofessional thing she'd ever heard. And yet the way he said it, so calmly, so matter-of-fact, made her pause. He didn't leer. He didn't flirt. He didn't promise anything vulgar. He simply offered her a space in his routine, a place in his night. She told herself she wouldn't go. At 10:05 p.m., she stood outside the service elevator to the top floor. She didn't even remember how she got there. The day had passed in a blur. She'd gone back to her apartment, stared at her cracked phone screen for hours, checked her bank balance, thought about her overdue rent, and tried to forget the look in his eyes when he said he didn't want an apology. At 10:06, the elevator doors opened. A man in a black suit nodded at her. No questions asked. The ride-up was quiet. When the doors slid open again, she found herself in a private hallway she had never seen before. Polished floors, dim lighting, abstract art, everything expensive and deliberately understated. She stepped inside the office. He was already there, no jacket, sleeves rolled up, reading something on a tablet with one hand, a tumbler of something amber in the other. "You're late," he said without looking up. "It's 10:06, she replied. "Still late," he said, then looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "But I'll allow it." "Tonight." She crossed her arms. "I'm not sleeping with you." He took a sip of his drink. "Good. I didn't ask you to. Then what am I doing here?" He set the glass down, finally meeting her eyes fully. "Keeping me awake. That's ridiculous, is it?" "Yes. This is insane. I shouldn't be here. And yet, here you are." She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Because she didn't understand it either. She should have felt objectified, humiliated, angry. But what she felt was watched. Not in the predatory sense, in the way someone stares at a painting too long because they're trying to figure out how it makes them feel. He gestured toward the leather chair across from his desk. Sit, Miss Hart. No contracts. No demands. If you choose to leave after 1 hour, you can walk, but if you stay, we talk. Nothing else. Not tonight. She hesitated, then sat. Why me? He studied her for a long beat before answering. Because you didn't flinch. Because your mistake wasn't calculated. Because when I looked at that photo, I didn't see a body. I saw someone trying to come back to life. Emily didn't breathe. And because, he added, in a voice lower now, you're the first woman I've seen in years who looked naked without looking ashamed. She stared at him and realized, for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel small. She felt visible, not perfect, not powerful, just real. For the next 3 nights Emily returned. She told herself each time that it would be the last, that it didn't mean anything, that she was only there because she was curious or maybe because she didn't have anything better to do. But the truth sat heavy in her chest, refusing to be silenced. She went back because something about the way he looked at her made her feel more human than she had in years. Not desired, not objectified, just seen. They didn't touch. They barely spoke at first. He would be at his desk, always reading, always working, always 3 steps removed from the world. She would sit in the chair across from him, with a cup of tea she didn't drink, watching him in the low light as the hours blurred. Sometimes he would ask questions, nothing invasive, nothing predictable. What do you think makes a man dangerous? Do you believe people can change? What's the worst thing you've ever forgiven? She didn't always answer, but when she did, her words were quiet and brutal, and he listened like no one ever had. The 4th night, something shifted. She arrived a minute early. He noticed. Good. You're adjusting. To what? To expectation. She sat, but this time closer to the edge of the seat. You're still calling this a distraction. He looked up. What would you call it? She hesitated. I'm not sure yet, but I don't think it's distraction when I leave here and still feel you in my bones. He didn't speak, just studied her like a riddle he couldn't solve. Later that night, he walked her to the elevator. It was the first time he stepped outside his office with her. She looked up at him, and before the doors opened, she said, What happens if I stop showing up? He paused. Then I suppose I'd start waiting. You wait? She asked, surprised. He gave a half smile. I've waited longer for less. On the 6th night, she didn't go. Not because she didn't want to, but because she wanted to too much. She sat in her apartment with her phone on the table, waiting for a message that never came. When she finally fell asleep, it was restless, filled with dreams she couldn't name. In the morning, there was no email, no call, just silence. That silence echoed in her bones. She returned the next night, without explanation, without apology. He didn't mention her absence, but something about the way he looked at her told her he had noticed, that it mattered. He slid a book across the desk to her. The cover was plain, the pages well worn. She opened it. Poetry. Neruda. She blinked at him. How did you? You left a quote on your resume, he said simply. The real one. Page 78. Her chest tightened. It was a love poem, not the sweet kind, the aching kind, the kind that felt like bleeding in reverse. She looked up. And you think this is what? A peace offering? A confession? His eyes didn't move from hers. A mirror. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away. Later that night, as she stood by the window watching the city lights, he walked up beside her. They stood in silence. You know, he said slowly, I've never let anyone stay past midnight. Emily didn't turn. Why now? Because I don't want to forget what it feels like when you're here. She swallowed hard. You don't even touch me. He glanced at her, his voice low. That's exactly why. On the 9th night, she entered the office and found the lights dimmer than usual. He was seated on the floor, back against the window, sleeves rolled, barefoot. Something looked undone about him. She hesitated at the doorway. "Everything okay?" He nodded. "Sit, not in the chair. Here, with me." She didn't ask questions. She crossed the room and sat beside him. Their shoulders almost touched. Almost. She looked at his hands. Strong. Still. "Do you bring other women here?" she asked. "No." "Do you want to?" "No." "Then why me?" He exhaled. "Because you don't try to impress me. Because you don't laugh when I say nothing. Because when you walked into this office with shame on your face, you still met my eyes. And now, every night, I want to see what else you'll let me see." She looked away, unsure how to carry that weight. Then came the 12th night. It was raining. Hard. She arrived soaked, her jacket clinging to her frame. He watched her walk in, dripping, cheeks flushed from the wind. "You didn't have to come in this." She shrugged. "I didn't come for the weather?" He handed her a towel. She dried her arms, her collarbone. He stared for a second too long. She noticed. The air changed. "Do you want to see the original photo again?" she asked suddenly. His jaw tightened. "No." "Why not?" "Because I'd rather see what you look like when you decide to be seen." She stepped closer. "And if I said I was ready? Ready for what? For more than watching, for more than sitting across from your desk, pretending we're not both craving something we can't name." His voice was low. "Then I'd say, take one step closer and I'll forget every rule I've made since I met you." She did. His breath caught, but he didn't touch her. "You think you can undo me," he said softly. She looked him dead in the eyes. "No, I think you've already been undone. I just showed up to watch." His hand lifted, paused mid-air like a man unsure of permission. She didn't move, didn't flinch. He brushed a damp curl away from her cheek. His fingers lingered at her jaw. "You're freezing. Then warm me." He stepped back. "Not like this." "Why not?" "Because if I touch you tonight, I won't let you leave." Her pulse thundered. "What if I don't want to?" He stared at her. "Then stay. But no, this isn't a game anymore. If you stay tonight, you stay in more than body." She hesitated. Then she sat on the couch and waited. He poured 2 glasses of wine, sat beside her. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the space between them had changed. The weight of restraint hung heavy. And underneath it all, something tender began to bloom, something they couldn't control. It was on the 15th night that Emily realized she was no longer afraid of the silence between them. It used to feel loaded, filled with tension or expectation or something neither of them wanted to name. But now the silence had softened. It had shape. It had breath. It was a place they both returned to, willingly, like a shared language only the two of them understood. That night, he didn't sit behind his desk. Instead, he was waiting by the window, sleeves rolled, barefoot again, holding 2 mugs of something warm. She entered without knocking. He didn't say a word, just handed her the mug. She sat beside him. No space between them this time. Their knees touched. The rain was steady against the glass. He broke the quiet first. "Do you ever think about what people would say if they saw this?" She raised an eyebrow. "This? Us." She stared ahead. "There is no us." He smiled faintly. "Isn't that the safest way to keep it real?" She didn't answer right away. Then she asked, "Why do you always ask questions instead of just telling me what you feel?" "Because I don't trust my feelings," he said simply. "I trust yours more." That made something in her tighten. She turned toward him. "What happened to you, Alexander?" He looked like he didn't expect her to ask, but he didn't look away. "I trusted someone once. She sold that trust to someone else. There was money involved, power. The details don't matter anymore. What matters is that it broke something in me. Since then, I've built everything with one rule. Don't feel. Don't let anyone close enough to confuse the lines. She listened. And then you showed up. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't ask for anything. And still, you undid all of it. Her fingers wrapped tighter around the mug. I didn't mean to undo you. He looked over, expression unreadable. Then why did you stay? She hesitated, because for the first time in years I wasn't invisible, and that terrified me more than being alone ever did. That night, for the first time, she told him about her own scars. Not all of them, but enough. About the man who taught her that silence was safer than screaming. About the mother who refused to believe her. About the years she spent hiding in plain sight, making herself small, forgetting how to be touched without recoiling. He listened without interruption, without pity, just presence. When she finished, he didn't speak. He simply reached over, slowly, carefully, and took her hand. Not possessively, not protectively, just gently. His thumb moved across the back of her knuckles like it was learning her shape. She looked at their hands, then at him. And you still want me here? He didn't blink. I've never wanted anyone more. They sat that way for a long time, connected by touch and something deeper, something unnamed. Later, as the hour grew late, he asked her to stay. Not for wine, not for distraction, not even for conversation. Just stay. She did. They didn't sleep in the same bed. She curled up on the leather couch in the lounge outside his room. He left the door open. In the middle of the night, she heard him pacing. Not restless, just human. By the 18th night, they had established a rhythm. She arrived late. He was already waiting. She brought something small, a notebook, a poem, once a single photo she'd taken of an old woman laughing alone in a park. He brought silence, warmth, sometimes a question that went unanswered for days. Then came the moment that broke their pattern. It was a Thursday. She found him sitting on the couch with his head in his hands, not composed, not controlled, just quiet, broken energy. She froze. Alexander? His voice was muffled. I lost something today. She stepped closer. What? He looked up. Myself. She sat beside him. What happened? One of my board members leaked a merger negotiation. It cost us a deal. I should care. I don't. I should be angry. I'm just tired. She placed a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was instinctive, intimate. He didn't flinch. He covered her hand with his. You're not broken, she said softly. You're just bleeding where no one can see. He turned to her, eyes darker now, heavier. You always say the things I'm not ready to hear. She smiled gently. Maybe I'm saying them for me too. Then he reached out and touched her cheek. It wasn't sexual. It was reverent. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You call it bravery, she said, but it still feels like fear most days. Fear of being wrong, fear of being touched, fear of disappearing again. He leaned closer, forehead against hers. Then let me be the one who doesn't disappear. That was the first night they fell asleep together. No tension, no pretense. He pulled her into his bed without a word. She curled beside him, their bodies pressed close, fully clothed, his arms around her waist, her head resting on his chest. His heart beat steady beneath her ear. She whispered, You don't have to protect me. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm not your project. I know, he said. You're not mine, but I want to be yours. When she woke up, he was already awake, watching her. She blinked. How long have you been staring? Long enough to know I want this to be the first thing I see every morning. Don't say that if you don't mean it. He kissed the top of her head. I don't say anything I don't mean. Not to you. Over the next few days, everything deepened. She started bringing pieces of herself into his space. A sweater left on the couch, her sketchbook forgotten on his desk. He didn't move them. He left them there like offerings. She noticed that he started working less after midnight, spending more time just sitting near her, not reading, not strategizing, just being. Then came the private moment that changed everything. He walked in on her sketching. She was seated cross-legged on the lounge rug, hair tied up, eyes narrowed in focus. He stood quietly for a moment, before asking, "Can I see?" She hesitated, then handed him the pad. The drawing wasn't of him, it was of her, but not how she looked now. It was her as a child, small, curled into herself, eyes too big for her face. She looked at him, unsure. "This is who I was when I stopped trusting people." He stared at the drawing, then at her. "And who are you now?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "I'm the girl you called a distraction, trying to believe I'm more." He knelt beside her, laid the sketchpad down, and looked into her face. "You're not a distraction, Emily. You're the reason I remember what it means to feel." "Then don't forget," she whispered. "Don't go back. I won't. I can't. Not after you." She leaned into him, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't careful. It wasn't slow. It wasn't the promise of later. It was now. Real, messy, full of the kind of hunger that comes from surviving too long without touch. She didn't stop him. He didn't push, but when their bodies met, it wasn't for pleasure. It was for healing. Skin against skin, breath tangled in breath. She guided his hand to her ribs, to the place where she once hated the way her body curved. He didn't speak, just kissed the spot like it deserved reverence. She let him see all of her, and he looked like a man seeing daylight after years in a cave. When it was over, they lay together in the dark, her fingers tracing the scar on his wrist he never spoke about. She didn't ask. She just held it, like holding his past wouldn't scare her. He whispered, "I thought I could control this. I thought if I kept my distance, I'd be safe. But I'm not safe anymore, and I don't want to be." "Neither do I," she whispered, and in that quiet space, filled with nothing but breath and truth, they stopped pretending. This wasn't about mistakes. This was the beginning of something neither of them had ever known. Not lust, not comfort, just the rare, terrifying weight of being completely seen. For the first time since that night, Emily didn't return home. She didn't even check her phone. Her world, once a chaos of overdue rent, unanswered emails, and silent alarms, had shrunk to the quiet rhythm of his breath beside her. In the morning, Alexander was already dressed, coffee in one hand, shirt half-buttoned, reading something on his tablet. She watched him move with precision, like a man whose life had always been orchestrated down to the second, and for a moment she wondered what it must feel like to belong in a space like this. Then he looked up and smiled, not the half-curved grin she had grown used to, but something slower, more personal, like she was the only thing softening the sharp edges of his day. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, still curled in his bed, and said, "I'm not used to waking up in silence that doesn't feel empty." He came closer, sat at the edge of the bed, and brushed her hair from her cheek. "That's because this silence is yours now, too." The day unfolded without ceremony. She stayed. He left for meetings, but instead of locking up the penthouse like a vault, he left her a keycard. A handwritten note on the counter said, "Back by 5. Don't leave." She didn't. She wandered through the space, barefoot, hair undone, wearing one of his shirts. The kitchen, the study, the balcony overlooking the skyline, it all felt like a world paused mid-breath. On his desk, she found a sketch she had left behind days ago. He had tucked it into a folder marked private. Something about that made her chest tighten. At exactly 5:02, the elevator chimed. He walked in, loosened his tie, and the moment he saw her standing barefoot near the window, his gaze changed. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He crossed the room slowly, deliberately, until he was standing behind her. "You stayed." Her voice was steady. You told me not to leave. His hand brushed her hip. That's not why you stayed. She turned to face him, her breath shallow. No, it's not. Then tell me why, because for once I don't feel like I'm trying to earn my place in someone's life. He cupped her jaw, fingers warm, eyes unreadable. You don't have to earn anything here. You just have to stay. That night, everything unraveled. There was no pretense, no game, no carefully crafted distance. He kissed her like he'd been waiting since the first moment she walked into his office. Her body responded before her mind could catch up. She let him guide her to the bedroom, let him lift her shirt over her head, let him look. Really look, not at her body, at her. Every inch of skin he touched, he did so with the kind of reverence that made her feel like a cathedral, not a woman. His hands weren't urgent. They were patient, like he was memorizing her. She wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to being handled like she mattered. She whispered, "You're undoing me." He replied, "Then let me do it slowly." Every barrier she had ever built fell away. He kissed her shoulder like a promise, her spine like a confession. She touched the scar just below his ribs and asked nothing. He kissed the inside of her wrist and said everything. Their bodies met with quiet desperation, the kind born from two people who had been starved of gentleness for too long. She didn't cry, but she felt like she could. He didn't beg, but something in the way he held her made her feel like he'd never let go if she asked him not to. When it was over, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like memory. She traced the line of his collarbone, her voice barely audible. "This doesn't feel real." "It is. It can't be." "Why not?" "Because nothing this good ever stays." He turned to her, hand on her waist. "Then let's not ruin it by asking how long. Let's just breathe." But the world outside didn't wait. By Monday, the whispers had started. One of the junior PR managers saw Emily stepping out of a private elevator, wearing the same clothes from the night before. A cleaning staff member noticed a change in the security schedule on the penthouse floor. Someone from the legal team leaked an internal memo with her name on it, marked confidential. By Wednesday, her inbox had gone from empty to overwhelming. Requests from HR, a flagged message from the ethics committee, a warning from someone anonymous. "He's done this before. Don't think you're special." She didn't tell Alexander, not at first, but he knew something had shifted. On Thursday night, she arrived late. He was standing by the window, glass untouched, jaw tight. Trouble? She tried to brush it off. Just office noise. He walked toward her. "What kind of noise?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "Yes, it does." "I'll handle it." "No," she said, suddenly sharper. "That's not what I want. You don't need to fix this." "Then what do you want?" She looked at him, exhausted. "I want to exist in your world without becoming a headline. I want to wake up beside you without feeling like a risk." He stepped closer. "You're not a risk. You're the only thing that makes sense, but I can't protect you from the noise unless I take you out of it." "What are you saying? Come with me. Leave this." "At least for a while. I own a house in Lisbon. There are no boardrooms, no whispers, no contracts, just space. Us." She stared at him. "And what happens when we come back?" "We decide that together." She didn't answer then. But that night, she stayed. Longer than usual. And when she left just before sunrise, he walked her out for the first time, held her hand in the elevator, watched the doors close like something fragile was slipping away. By Friday morning, the article dropped. It wasn't explicit, just enough to stir speculation. Anonymous source reveals CEO's mysterious night visitor. A blurry image of Emily caught mid-laugh exiting the tower. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the internet didn't need names. People guessed, people commented, people tore her apart in threads that multiplied by the hour. She tried to ignore it, tried to stay quiet, but when she opened her laptop and saw a dozen emails titled "Urgent," she knew. Her phone rang. Unknown number, then another, then a third. By the time she answered, her voice was shaking. HR. We need to speak with you immediately. She walked to the office. Alexander was already there, waiting. When he saw her, he stood. You're not going in there alone. She stared at him. If you walk in with me, it's real. It already is. The meeting was short, brutal. They questioned timelines, appropriateness, power, dynamics. She answered calmly, clearly. Alexander sat beside her the whole time, not as a CEO, as a man refusing to let her face it alone. When it ended, the head of HR said, We'll be in touch. Please don't return to the building until we've reviewed our findings. She walked out without looking back. In the car, she was silent. He reached for her hand. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is the cost. Of what? Of being real. He nodded. Then I'll pay it again. And again. As long as you keep choosing this. She looked over. I already did. That night they didn't go back to the penthouse. They booked a flight. They didn't pack much, just the pieces of themselves they hadn't shown anyone else. And as the plane took off, Emily rested her head on his shoulder. No more hiding, no more pretending. This wasn't a distraction anymore. This was the fall, the fire, the risk, and maybe, finally, the beginning of something real. They landed in Lisbon just before dawn. The sky was a deep, sleepy blue, and the air smelled like salt and old stone. Alexander didn't speak much on the drive to the house. Emily didn't need him to. She sat beside him in the back of the car, legs tucked under her, wearing his hoodie and holding on to the quiet, like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. When they reached the house, it was exactly as he'd described, simple, sprawling, built into a hillside overlooking the sea. No staff, no cameras, no alarms, just floor-to-ceiling windows, white sheets, and the sound of the ocean folding into itself over and over again. Emily stepped out barefoot, walked to the edge of the deck, and exhaled like she hadn't in weeks. He stood behind her, watching. You always look like you're preparing to leave, he said quietly. She turned to him. That's because I never expect to be asked to stay. In the days that followed, something changed. They slept in the same bed. They cooked without recipes. They kissed like it was a language they were both still learning. He watched her draw. She watched him unlearn everything that had made him distant. But even paradise has shadows. On the 5th night, she woke up alone. She walked through the house, calling his name softly, found him standing in the kitchen, staring at his phone, shirtless, eyes unreadable. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer, just handed her the screen. Her heart stopped. The article was everywhere again. Only this time, it named her full name, photos, a history of her freelance gigs, a rumor that she had been hired not for talent but for company. One paragraph even quoted a former peer from college calling her a quiet girl with big eyes and bigger secrets. Emily handed the phone back, her hands cold. I didn't think it could get worse. I'm sorry, Alexander said. I should have seen it coming. She looked at him, something sharp behind her voice. No, what you should have done is warned me, protected me before it got this far. I did everything I could. She shook her head. No, you did everything you could once it affected you. He stepped forward. Don't do that. Don't turn this into blame. I'm not blaming you. I'm just tired. Tired of being the one who always has to carry the shame while you get to walk away with clean hands. You think my hands are clean? You think this hasn't cost me everything I built? I didn't ask you to sacrifice anything, she said. And I didn't ask to fall for you, he snapped. But here we are. Silence filled the space between them, heavier than anything they'd carried before. She backed away slowly. Maybe we needed the noise to realize this isn't sustainable. Maybe this was never meant to last. Don't say that. Why not? Because it's not true. She stared at him, eyes full of something that looked like grief. You said you wanted real. Well, this is real, and real hurts. Then stay. Fight with me, not against me. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not while her name was a punchline across the internet. Not while her past had been pulled apart for clicks and comments. That night, she packed quietly. A single bag. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors. She left a note on the kitchen counter. I need to remember who I am without your world shaping it. If this was ever real, you'll understand why I have to go. He didn't chase her. Not right away. He gave her the space she asked for. A week passed, then 2. He didn't sleep, didn't eat much. Every corner of the house reminded him of her. Her laugh in the hallway, the way she left her socks tucked under the couch, the sketch she taped to the fridge with no explanation. He stared at that sketch every night. It wasn't of him. It was of 2 hands reaching for each other but never quite touching. On the 15th day, he flew back to New York, back to the tower that now felt like a mausoleum. Blake was waiting in the lobby. You look like shit, he said. Alexander didn't respond, just walked past him into the elevator. The office was quieter than usual. People didn't make eye contact. The whispers had changed tones from gossip to discomfort. Alexander sat at his desk, pulled up the headline, and read it again. This time, all the way through. At the very bottom, a name caught his eye. Evelyn, his former PR director, his ex, the one person who had both motive and access. She had always hated Emily, hated the way she disrupted the rules, hated the way she didn't care about the hierarchy. He picked up the phone, called legal, and within hours had confirmation. The leak came from Evelyn's old server. She had submitted the story anonymously through a third party. He didn't call the press, didn't threaten a lawsuit. He released a single statement. I know who leaked it. I know why. And I won't be silent about who I choose to care for. Within 24 hours, Evelyn's consulting contracts were terminated. Her name was removed from every media deck. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it because Emily had trusted him with her silence, and he had let it be shattered. That night, he sat alone in the penthouse, staring out at the city, wondering if love was always this quiet after it exploded. 3 days later, he got in his car and drove. Not to her apartment, not to her studio. To the last place she had mentioned wanting to see her grandmother's cabin 3 hours north of the city. He remembered her talking about it once softly, in passing. Said it was the only place she ever felt safe growing up. He didn't know if she'd be there, but when he pulled up the gravel road and saw a light flickering through the front window, he knew. She opened the door slowly, barefoot, in a sweater too big for her frame, and just stared at him. He didn't speak right away, just held out a folded piece of paper. She took it, opened it. It was her sketch, the 2 hands, only this time, one of the hands had moved. They touched. I didn't come to fix anything, he said. I came to ask for a second chance. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Why now? Because I finally understood something. Real doesn't mean perfect. It just means willing. And I'm willing to walk back through the fire with you, if you'll let me. She studied him. You still think I'm the distraction? He shook his head. No, you're the reason I slowed down long enough to feel. And I'd rather feel everything with you than feel nothing without you. She stepped back, just slightly. You hurt me. I know. You let them tear me apart. I know that too. Then why should I believe it'll be different? He looked at her with nothing but raw honesty. Because I'm not asking you to step back into my world. I'm asking if I can build a new one beside you. She stood in the doorway, the wind tugging at the hem of her sweater, and for a moment, it was quiet again. That kind of quiet that only lives between 2 people who have seen each other's broken pieces and still stayed. Finally, she said, I'm not the same girl who sent you that photo. I know, and I'm not the man who laughed at it. She folded the paper again. Then let's see who we are now. Together. He stepped inside. She closed the door. This time, the silence between them wasn't distance. It was home. The cabin was smaller than he imagined, but it held warmth in all the right places. The furniture was worn, the wood creaked under each step, and the air smelled like pine and something older, something steady. Emily moved through the space, like she belonged there, barefoot on cold floors, her hair loose, her voice quieter, but no longer afraid. That night, they sat on the floor beside the fireplace, a single blanket around them. And for the first time in weeks, they didn't speak about the past. They spoke about everything else, about what they wanted to build, about a life that didn't require apologies, about mornings filled with silence that didn't carry weight. Alexander listened more than he talked. He learned the way her voice softened when she spoke about art, the way her fingers danced in the air when she explained an idea, the way she still paused before saying, "I deserve this." And when she finally said those words, he stopped breathing just for a second, because that was the moment he knew she wasn't healing. Because of him, she was healing beside him. And that mattered more. Weeks passed before they returned to the city. Not with press releases or apologies, just quietly, together. Emily didn't go back to the same desk, the same title, the same label. Instead, Alexander introduced her as the new head of a creative fund, an initiative she designed herself to support underrepresented artists, women with talent but no platform. Some still whispered, some stared, but she no longer flinched. And when people asked what she had done to earn that place, she answered, with calm eyes and a straight spine, "I stopped waiting for permission." Alexander, too, had changed. He wasn't softer, he was sharper in the right ways. He made space in meetings for different voices. He no longer acted like silence meant control. And at night, when the office lights dimmed and the rest of the world slipped into artificial calm, he still looked for her, but not like a man chasing relief, like a man who had learned how to hold on without gripping too tightly. One evening, months later, they stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the same skyline, a different story. She wore a black dress, simple, elegant, nothing borrowed. He slipped a small box into her hand. No diamonds, no contract, just a ring shaped like a thin gold thread. She looked at it, then at him. "I never thought I'd be someone who belonged in this view." He touched her cheek. "You were always the view. I just needed to look up." They didn't get married that year. They didn't announce their love in headlines. What they built was quieter than that, stronger than that. A series of moments stitched together by choice, not by accident. And sometimes when she couldn't sleep, she'd ask him, "Do you remember the day I accidentally sent you that file?" And he'd answer, "I remember everything that happened after." Because mistakes don't always break you. Sometimes they break you open. And in that opening, something truer begins. The final truth wasn't in the scandal. It wasn't in the headlines. It was in the way he reached for her hand without thinking, in the way she held it like she'd never let go, in the life they built quietly, bravely, without apology. Sometimes a mistake is the best beginning.